Hello everyone, welcome to my Resident Evil 2 Remake, Hardcore difficulty, Claire 1 scenario, no damage, knife only, S plus walkthrough, and this is going to be from the beginning area all the way to G1 Birkin. And if you've been keeping up with my channel, this might come as a surprise to you, and it's honestly surprising for me that I'm doing a walkthrough of this game, considering I've done many live streams of this game on hardcore difficulty. And to further add on to that, this is probably my least favorite Resident Evil game by far. It just doesn't feel like Resident Evil at all. And it was just such a disappointment for me that, I ended up not playing it for a while. I mean, it was still on my PS4 storage space, in case I ever decided to come back to it, and I guess now's that day when I decide to come back to Resident Evil 2 Remake. And I guess another reason why I'm doing a walkthrough of this game is just because Resident Evil 3 Remake is coming out, so it only makes sense to do a walkthrough of Resident Evil 2 Remake. And also, doing a walkthrough of Resident Evil 2 Remake will allow me to express my thoughts on this game and the future Resident Evil in a more clear manner that's actually short and concise. Because, I mean, there's 4 scenarios in this game, even though they all exactly feel the same, just with a few slight tweaks, and that's really it. But that should be more than enough for me to get a lot of my thoughts out on Resident Evil 2 Remake, and why I consider it to be my least favorite Resident Evil game. And I'm sure you can tell just from my tone of voice that I just don't feel very excited for this whatsoever. I'm normally the kind of guy who expresses a lot of passion for games, but, I'm not expressing that same exact passion right now because, I just don't feel like this game is that good. And if you're wondering what I'm basing my critique around when it comes to judging this particular Resident Evil game, it's not because of graphics, it's not because of atmosphere, it's not because of anything like that, it's all to do with the mechanics, and with the enemies, and with the bosses, and with the weapons, and everything like that. All those things define a Resident Evil game, and this game just doesn't have a lot of that at all. And doing a knife-only walkthrough is probably surprising for you. It would probably make a lot more sense to do a more normalized walkthrough where I just use every single weapon. But I hate the weapons on this game. I'm gonna have to pause on this tangent right now because we're gonna be running past some zombies. The zombies are stuck in recovery frames when they're busting through doors, so you can use this to get past them. And then right here, you're gonna need to hug the left-hand side before looping back to the right-hand side, so that you can get this female zombie to attack first, because when a zombie attacks, it delays the other zombies for a split second, so that you can run past them. And if you do it exactly the way I just did it, you will get it where the female zombie always attacks. If you don't do it like that, there is a chance that the male zombie will attack, and he will grab you every single time. But now we are finally equipped with the knife, and to proceed back to my previous tangent, I don't like the weapons on this game. The weapons on this game just feel like a waste of space, and they just don't feel that different in all honesty. They just don't feel beneficial in the slightest. It doesn't feel like if I had this particular weapon, this section would be very easy. The feedback on the weapons is very unreliable on this game, and the enemies are set up in such a way where you never even have to deal with them at all. I mean, on the topic of feedback, zombies just walk through your bullets. They don't flinch whatsoever, and the flinch animations that are present are very inconsistent. It can sometimes take like 3 shots to stun a zombie, sometimes it'll take 1 shot, and then other times it'll take 5 shots. It's just not beneficial in the slightest. And I have heard that shooting the leg of a zombie is actually the most reliable way of stunning them. And when you do stun them, they can't actually cancel their stuns, so you can just run past them. But it's all completely pointless, because on this game, they've brought back the sprint counter from Resident Evil 4. So if you sprint towards an enemy, they will do their attack animation very early. This is not the case with all enemies. Like Licorice, for instance, don't respond to this. Ivies don't respond to this. Like, zombies actually respond to this, which is helpful. And right there, that was very risky. Normally, what I do is I knife that guy on the staircase, because when you stand still and knife, you do get a bit of lunge. So you can use the lunge to hit that zombie in the leg and still remain safe. Although I have had moments where he has still managed to grab me, even though I was just knifing him at a distance. So I just decided to do it a little bit differently, since I saw somebody do it like that, and it paid off. But I recommend either knifing him on the staircase or just luring him down there and just running past him. This is not a speed run, this is just a no damage walkthrough. So any method that you want to do, you can just do it if you're trying to go for no damage. But on the topic of staircases, Zombies, for some unknown reason, move faster on staircases when they do the running grab, and they even do the speed boost sometimes when they're on flat ground, and they can use the speed boost when they're on flat ground to immediately transition onto the staircase at a very fast speed. And that's just one of the things that the zombies can do to cheat on this game. The zombies can actually hide behind doors if you end up leaving the area too quickly. So when you go back through that door, they're right behind the door and they just immediately grab you, which is complete bullcrap. That is the case. And on hardcore difficulty, and this is also the case on normal difficulty, whenever the zombies are starting their grab animation and you're quite close to them, they have the ability to do the grab twice to get a massive speed boost. And it is very hard to get away from them because you run so slowly on this game. And I just consider it very unfair that that is the case. And if you're going to put in a system like that, where you're giving the enemy a speed boost, you have to have the right systems to balance that out, but there's nothing like that on this game. The weapons on this game are just not very good at eliciting hit stun. On Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6, you had these really fast attacks for the enemies, but you had the flinch animations necessary to balance them out, and they were in their higher numbers, so that added more to the challenge to it, and that I feel is perfectly acceptable. On Resident Evil 7, you didn't really have the advantage of feedback, but you had these different mechanics to help you avoid the enemy attacks. Like, for instance, you could block on that game, and there were certain attacks that you could block that didn't do any damage to you. And you also had the ability to dodge, because on Resident Evil 7 you could use the crouch to dodge. And that perfectly accommodated the slower movement of Resident Evil 7 in relation to Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6. Like, I cannot believe that a game like Resident Evil 7, which many consider to be inferior to Resident Evil 2 Remake, has more impressive systems, more fair enemies, more fair designs than this game does. And it's just so ironic because this game runs on the exact same engine as Resident Evil 7, so they've had plenty of time to understand the engine a lot better and to make all these minute adjustments. But it's like they didn't apply the minute adjustments that they applied to Resident Evil 7. It's like they just abandoned them entirely, and instead they just focused all on graphics. Oh, and by the way, right here, I get really bad RNG because this guy decides to go near the door that I'm trying to open, so I'm gonna have to wait him out. And then right here, the policeman actually busts through the door behind me, so I'm gonna have to wait on that as well. And then these two zombies over here see me through the window. So you never want to get it where that zombie gets near the door, because then stuff like this happens. And right there I use the sprint counter to get past him, and then I get very, very lucky here because this woman missed me with her grab, and now I'm just waiting for the door to open right here, and there's an invisible barrier blocking me, which is so stupid. So I could have been grabbed at this point, but I get very lucky. If that was Resident Evil 7, I could have just crouched under the door. Why does there have to be an invisible barrier just waiting for the door to open? It's so dumb. It really is. And then right here, I recommend that after meeting Marvin and placing the two medallions, you use the two wooden boards that you picked up if you were following this video to block off two windows. The window to my left right here, and the window that is directly ahead of me, so that these additional zombies don't spawn in. I just choose to go along with this because I just reverted to speedrun mentality, because this is practically what you do in a speedrun. But as I mentioned before, this is not a speedrun, this is no damage run. So take my advice, board up those two windows and you'll be fine. The wooden boards last permanently, so the zombies will never be able to get through, so long as you place them at the proper moment. This doesn't affect Scenario 2, however. If you were to go to Leon 2, because Leon 2 takes place alongside the events of Claire 1, you would not see any of these wooden boards. In fact, one of my biggest criticisms of this game is that it's almost impossible to establish the proper chronology of events that take place between each of the link scenarios. So Claire 1 and Leon 2, there are certain aspects of the scenarios that don't make any sense. Like, for instance, you fight G1 Birkin in the exact same room. G3 Birkin, Annette dies differently, so you can't really establish which happened first. And that's not how it worked in the original Resident Evil 2. In the original version of Resident Evil 2, when you reached a particular boss area, the boss you fought was different. Like with G1 Birkin, for instance, if you fought G1 Birkin in one scenario, on another scenario, you'd be fighting a G adult. So that made total sense, and it helped establish the proper chronology of events that took place in the original version of Resident Evil 2. Another great example is Resident Evil 6. Resident Evil 6 has a lot of great examples that help establish the continuity of events that take place. I'll give one example because there's a lot to list. There's a Lepotitsa that you fight in a plane on Leon's campaign that you completely throw out of the plane. That Lepotitsa can be seen in Jake's campaign and Ada's campaign, so you know that That particular event in Leon's campaign is happening at almost the exact same moment where Jake and Ada are in their campaigns. And I think Resident Evil 6 did a fantastic job of establishing the continuity of events that take place. And I don't understand why this is not the case with this game. The scenarios, for the most part, feel very similar to each other, which only diminishes the replayability of this game. I mean, the only big change that the second run really gives is with Mr. X appearing very early on in the game, and then with, you know, certain enemy placements in the sewers and the laboratory area. But that's really it. And also the puzzles are different in the second run. Why would the puzzles be different? Like, the puzzles that I'm doing right now in the RPD building are different on the second run, even though on the first run they should have been done already. It's so bizarre that that is the case. But right here, this female zombie is an absolute pain. She is the most random aspect of the library, so I'm going to try to get rid of her by doing what I just did. So I lured her into that room because I know I'm not going to be coming back to that room. And then I go through 2 doors to stop her from trying to break down the door. If you do that, she just freezes in that room. And before dealing with her, I dealt with a licker. I didn't really explain what I did against the licker, but essentially all you gotta do is run past him while he's munching on the corpse, get in the room, wait a little bit, and then just walk. And you will just deal with him every time. Now, right there, while the timer was counting down, I exited the room. This is something that Carcinogen SDA demonstrated. When you do that, you will stop the shelf from falling over. Only when you go through that door, though. And you might have noticed that I was moving quite a distance away from that room while the timer was counting down. I did that to potentially stop the zombie that's inside the ceiling from falling down, because he is alive. It works most of the time, but then there are other times when it doesn't work. This run, it managed to work. So try doing that, and most likely the zombie will not get up. And right here, there's a licker. Hug the left-hand side and you'll be fine. Serpent17 struggled a lot with that licker for some bizarre reason. He decided to use a flash grenade. He said that running past it didn't work, but that has worked for me every single time, so I don't know what Serpent17 is talking about. But I think now's the best time to talk about the lickers. So the lickers on this game can hear you while you're walking, but that doesn't mean they've engaged in combat with you. They will try to creep up slowly towards you, and they will actively change directions depending on whether you're walking or not. So this proved to be a problem for Carcinogen SDA, because he originally thought the lickers knew exactly where you were, and they just smelled you every single time. But that's not the case. If you stand still entirely for a few seconds, the lickers will actually lose you. And they will go into this particular animation where they indicate this. During that animation, if you just continue to walk, they will not respond to you. So my method for dealing with lickers, if I ever decide to do so, is to lure them, stand still for a few seconds, get them to do that animation, get behind them, and just repeatedly knife them, because the knife is very strong against lickers. It does do pretty good hit stun against them, but there are times when it just doesn't work, because of course hit stun in this game is very inconsistent. And lickers in general, when they're in a combat state, they are very bullcrap, because they gain light speed properties, and their hitboxes on their attacks are really bad, because they can hit you without having to touch you. And I can't speak much about the lickers right now because we're about to fight G1 Birkin. And G1 Birkin is very, very simple. He's a very simplistically designed boss. But doing a knife only is definitely the fastest way to get rid of him. So while he's transforming, you've got to get behind him. He's either going to grab you, or he's going to try to run. And he's running right now because I got away from him. I'm going to use the sprint counter against him because he is susceptible to the sprint counter. And I'm trying to do my method here, but I end up messing up because I ran into a wall. And I'm going to have to use the counterattack, and that does absolutely no damage. The counterattacks against the bosses do absolutely no damage, as Carcinogen SDA pointed out, which is once again one of the most questionable design choices ever that this game seems to embrace. Why the heck should bosses be invulnerable to counterattacks? It just doesn't make any sense. I jabbed it directly into his eyeball, which is his weak spot. And you want to know another thing that's really annoying about G1 Birkin? His weapon doesn't clip against the geometry. On the original version of Resident Evil 2, his weapon clipped against the geometry, so it led to so many creative strategies against him, and he felt like a Resident Evil boss. This just doesn't. I mean, you can use the sprint counter against him and it's effective, and you can also do the circle strategy against him, and you will absolutely demolish G1 Birkin by doing this. Just make sure you're strafing exactly like I do, and make sure you're doing some sharp turns while you're doing so, because he can hit you very easily with that 3-hit combo of his. But once again, use your sprint counter against him. Try to get behind him while he's in his recovery frames. There are times when he can potentially do his grab attack while he's in the recovery frames, and the grab has some really bad detection. He can grab you without having to touch you, and the hitbox lasts way longer than it perhaps should, which is really dumb. But I just don't know what to think about that boss. Should I be grateful that you can do a knife only and he goes down very quickly? I don't know. It's just... With G1 Birkin, I just feel a bit of a dilemma. I don't know if I should enjoy the fight because it's designed for knife only, or if I should hate the fight because this boss is just simplistically designed, so therefore it is possible to do knife only. And that dilemma just prevents me from really enjoying G1 Birkin for what he is, and it doesn't elicit the same kind of satisfaction I normally get from killing bosses knife only. And I can't really blame myself for feeling this way, especially after Resident Evil 4 and 7 introduced some really impressive bosses that you could do knife only that didn't feel simplistically designed. Like in Resident Evil 4, Krauser. Krauser is a boss that has so many different moves that make him very interesting to fight, and he is designed for knife only, because he flinches consistently, and the knife is so damaging against him. And then with Resident Evil 7, specifically the End of Zoe DLC, it's the same case with Jack Baker. Jack Baker from that DLC is designed for fist only, and he has so many different moves at his disposal that make him very interesting to fight, and he's especially challenging as well. And it made those kind of moments feel like they had an impact. Like, those two bosses have more of an impact than G1 Birkin did just then. And there's more to it than that, but I think I'll elaborate on this point further in the later videos. But that is the end of this first part, and by the way, you're not going to see me display my rank at the end, because it's not going to be an S+ rank. S+ requires you to beat the game in under an hour and a half, using only 3 saves, or less. And because of the fact that I'm doing this in the walkthrough format, and I have to make a save at the end of each video, so that I can perfect the strategies for the videos after that, I'm not going to be able to get this game in under 3 saves, because of that particular restriction, but don't think anything of it. Just follow what I do in the videos, and try your best not to do more than 3 saves, and you'll be fine. I'm just letting you guys know that just in case you decide to post a comment saying, oh, you've done more than 3 saves, so S+ is impossible. But stay tuned for the future parts. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.